This is Gaming Through the Ages, and today we're looking at Ys 3 Wanderers from Ys for the Super Nintendo. Although the footage is of the Japanese version of the game, it is available in English on the Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, and TurboGrafx-16 CD, and even the PlayStation 2. The game was also released on several earlier platforms in Japan, and the significant remake/update, Oath and Felghana, is available on the PlayStation Portable and on Steam. Ys 3 is a side-scrolling action RPG, and as such is a bit of a black sheep in the Ys series. It offers a different gameplay from the top-down approach in other games, and is often likened to Zelda 2 on the NES in that regard, albeit a much smaller game. In fact, Ys 3 is a considerably short game, with only 6 areas, one of which being the starting town. The game can be completed in a few short hours, depending on how difficult the player finds it. It's surprising how epic the story tries to be in such a short period of time, but those who can take it for what it's worth will likely find the story at least somewhat enjoyable. You play as Adol Christian, the recurring main protagonist of the series, and are visiting the hometown of his companion Dogi when you meet up with Dogi's childhood friend Elena and discover some things are amiss. What boils down to a short, stop a great evil from being unsealed story has some genuinely dramatic character moments, but don't go in expecting any sort of grand narrative. The music is, however, masterful, and I dare say some of the best I've ever heard on the Super Nintendo, but the sound effects don't deserve such high praise. Being as the game is an action RPG, Adol is able to level up by defeating enemies, which raises his attack, defense, and HP, but the level caps at only 16. By maxing out Adol's stats early on, which is a fairly easy feat, the majority of the game becomes significantly easier. Adol can find or buy swords, armor, and shields, which also serve to increase defense and attack strength. He can also find rings, which grant him abilities such as higher attack power, or a steady HP increase while constantly reducing his ring power. Ring power maxes out at 255, and is obtained by killing enemies or by paying gold in a shop, and gold is also collected by killing enemies. Adol can also buy a few other types of items, such as medicinal herbs, an item which damages enemies on screen, or an item to restore some ring power, among a couple others, but can only have one of each item in his inventory at a time. Some items do boast multiple uses, however. It's unfortunate that Adol's only attack comes down to a sword swipe, making the game feel very hack and slash. Neither enemies nor Adol have any invulnerability after taking a hit, so it's possible even at high levels to lose HP so quickly that the game over screen can come as quite a surprise. Fortunately, the player can save almost anywhere in the game, the main exception being during boss fights. This makes some of the more challenging segments, namely several boss fights, much easier to manage. The bosses, as is typical of the series, are the real meat of the game, and while some take a bit of trial and error, the majority come down to using a ring and quickly taking them out. Some do require a bit of evade and slash tactics, but only the end game boss felt like a decent test of skill. The biggest problem with Ys 3 is that the hit detection can be a bit off at times, and some of the hitbox placement is questionable, but since the enemies flash when they are hurt, this isn't a major detriment. During several sections of the game, the environment itself feels more threatening than the enemies scattered about, especially the traps, which can take nearly all of Adol's health in one go. All in all, Ys 3 is a bit of a mixed bag, and if you don't like what you've seen so far, I can't really recommend it, but if you're a curious fan of the Ys series, or you're just looking for a flawed but still simple fun action RPG, then it's probably worth checking out, since at the time of this review it remains a pretty inexpensive Super Nintendo game. The other ports of the game do offer up some differences both in gameplay and graphics, but are costlier alternatives. However, if you do want to see the game with advanced graphics and still have the same classic feel, the Super Nintendo port is probably the worst looking of the 16-bit era. That being said, if what you're seeing looks fun, I do recommend checking it out because it's a fun little game that you can finish in an evening, and it's something that I could see coming back to every now and then.